Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Today's question is, can I comment on the story we see about Casey Anthony indicating that she is starting a company related to private investigation in Florida? Other questions here would be, is she allowed to do this? And is this a good idea? Just a reminder, I'm not diagnosing anybody in this video, only speculating about what could be happening in a situation like this. If you enjoyed this video, please like it, subscribe to my channel, and consider supporting me on Patreon. I'll put the link to Patreon in the description for this video. I'll start with a quick background of this case before I move to my analysis. I've already covered this case in detail in another video. Casey Anthony is best known because of the 2008 death of her daughter, Kay Lee Anthony. Casey Anthony was charged in connection with that death, but in 2011, a jury found her not guilty of first-degree murder and 2 other lesser charges. She was, however, found guilty of lying to the police, which is a felony, and she had another conviction for check fraud that was unrelated to the death of her daughter. Because Anthony was in prison before and during her trial, she only had to serve a little bit more time for those lying to the police convictions before she was released. After being released from prison, she left Florida but had to return because she needed to serve probation for that check fraud case. In 2013, she filed bankruptcy. She had about $1,000 in assets against almost $800,000 in liabilities. At some point, she went to live with a man named Patrick McKenna, the lead investigator for her defense team. McKenna had also worked for other well-known individuals like O.J. Simpson, Yoko Ono, and John DuPont. At some point, McKenna also became her employer. At the time of making this video, Casey Anthony is 34 years old and McKenna is 72. Since her acquittal, Anthony has made efforts to lead a normal life. She started a photography business, but then closed it not long after that. She has gone out on dates, returned to partying. She frequented local bars and expressed an interest in having more children. She seems to have an interesting attitude for somebody in her situation. When asked about how she lied to the police, Anthony said, "People lie to the cops every day. I am just one of those unfortunate idiots who admitted that they lied." She says that she sleeps well at night and does not care about her critics. She understands that many people believe that she was guilty of murder. In December 2020, there was a filing in Florida to form a corporation named Case Research and Consulting Services, LLC. Casey Anthony was the registered agent on this filing. The way the story is reported by some outlets makes it seem as though Casey Anthony started a private investigation firm. But that's not what's indicated by this filing. The filing is really just to incorporate, specifically to create a limited liability corporation. If I had to guess, I would say that this is simply a way for her to process revenue from engaging in activity that she's legally allowed to do, like taking pictures, searching through public records, and things like that. This is not an application to be a private investigator. Casey Anthony is a felon. She can never be a private investigator in Florida or most anywhere else. As I mentioned, she was employed by Patrick McKenna. Maybe the relationship is changing where she'll be paid under this corporation instead of being paid as an employee. So it's almost like she's going from employee to independent contractor. Or it could be that she's just striking out on her own with those types of services. Regardless of the exact nature of what she'll be doing, it naturally leads to a number of questions, including how does somebody rebuild their life and career when most people believe they are guilty of murder, and yet somehow they're not in prison? I mentioned in the video I did a while back about Casey Anthony that 2 mental health professionals found that she was not psychopathic, she had normal levels of narcissism, and she has no mental disorder. It was said that she was unusually happy considering her circumstances, but outside of that, nothing here looks out of the ordinary. When she was in prison, it appears as though she expected to be acquitted based on the letters she wrote. The defense theory is that somehow Casey Anthony shut down. She just blacked out everything that was happening during the time that her daughter was missing. If one were to run under the assumption that Anthony did actually cause the death of her daughter, then she would need to possess a somewhat remarkable personality profile, a profile which would allow her to commit a heinous crime, but at the same time to not be or not appear to be psychopathic or narcissistic, a profile which would permit her to stay calm and even optimistic when she was facing life in prison or the death penalty, and a profile that allowed her to feel a sense of entitlement to rebuild her life. She believes she deserves to be successful, to get on with her life as if nothing happened, to put all that homicide stuff aside. Now, what about a situation where she was not guilty? I suppose that's technically a possibility, but we are left with the same situation, an unusual personality profile. What type of personality is consistent with repeatedly lying to the police, even though one is innocent? Casey Anthony will always be a bit of a mystery, so this latest information about her forming a corporation should not really be that surprising. There is no roadmap for somebody like Casey Anthony to rebuild their lives. If we look at a few other surprise not guilty verdicts, we see most of the time it's a tough life for people in this situation. O.J. Simpson managed to escape prison after being found not guilty of 2 murders, only to end up there later on unrelated charges. In addition, he faced a devastating civil suit. Robert Blake was in a similar situation. He was acquitted in 2005 for the 2001 murder of his wife, but then was hit with a massive civil suit. Sam Shepard was found not guilty of murdering his pregnant wife. This was after he originally was convicted of the murder and spent about 10 years in prison. That conviction was overturned. He would die in 1970, just 4 years after being released from prison. Alcohol was a contributing factor in his death. Lizzie Borden was acquitted in 1893 of the murder of her father and stepmother in Fall River, Massachusetts that occurred a year before. Lizzie and her sister inherited $300,000, which is about $8 million today. She bought a mansion and would live there until her death in 1927. Just based on that small sample, things only really worked out for one of those 4 people. Lizzie didn't really have it too bad after what happened, but Sam Shepard, Robert Blake, and O.J. Simpson had an unfavorable outcome. So things aren't looking too great for Casey Anthony. I was trying to figure out an analogy for the mentality that would have to exist for somebody like Anthony to behave the way she does. I came up with this analogy. Imagine a situation where a man went to work for a company that delivered products using vans. I'll refer to this man as Fred. Because the job involves driving, Fred has to take a drug test, but he used marijuana in the last few days. He talks to one of his friends who tells Fred, "Oh, don't worry about that. They're concerned with drugs like cocaine and heroin. Nobody's worried about marijuana anymore." Now, of course, this is inaccurate, but this is what Fred believes. Now, usually what happens with these drug screens, when there's a positive result, the lab has to contact the person who provided the sample before they tell the company who ordered the test. So they would have to contact Fred before the company that owns the vans. As individuals are waiting for the results, they can still technically work for the company. For example, perhaps Fred could be working in the warehouse instead of driving. As he is doing this, he talks to another employee in that warehouse. Let's call him Steve. And he tells Steve the whole story about how he used marijuana, but his friend told him it was no problem. So Fred is telling Steve how Fred is looking forward to driving the vans in the near future. Now, Steve knows that Fred is going to get fired. He has seen this before, but he doesn't tell Fred that information. He just lets him go about his day and enjoy the time he has to work in the warehouse. Fred goes about his business over the course of the workday. Every time he talks about what driving the van will be like, or tries to get more information about policies and procedures, maybe about benefits that he'll receive when he's a full-time van driver, Steve just kind of dismisses Fred, not willing to waste any time on somebody he knows will not be there in the near future. So here's the dichotomy. Steve knows the truth and behaves according to that truth. Fred believes in a lie and behaves according to that lie. Fred recognizes that marijuana is not compatible with driving, but he doesn't care. He believes he's entitled to that job, and he's willing to exploit some hypothetical technicality to keep the job. Moving back to Casey Anthony, it's almost like she doesn't truly understand her current station in life. There's a lack of insight. On top of that, there's no roadmap for a person in her situation, as I mentioned, so it's almost like she's trapped in some type of purgatory. It reminds me of the movie The Sixth Sense. I'll issue a spoiler alert for that 1999 movie starring Bruce Willis. It's like Anthony is some type of ghost. Anthony's true home should be in prison, but it's not. She's out of her element, detached. It's an out-of-prison experience. She's floating around, making ridiculous statements, and haunting people with stories of starting a business. In many ghost stories, the ghosts are a little bit more than an annoyance, as is the case here. Now moving to the last question. Is this a good idea? If she really is planning on doing any type of investigative work, the kind of work she may be allowed to do with the felony, should she do it? Again, I don't know what she's actually doing, but if it were the case that she was starting some type of private investigation firm, I think she would have a very small market. Her customers would be people who probably actually committed the crime, who have a reasonable chance of being found not guilty. This is not a growing market, and I think it would be a hard way to make a living, but I did think of a few interesting slogans that she could use for her firm if she was going to move forward with this type of plan. Don't let being guilty stop you from living your life. Let us help you find the real killer, with the word real in quotes, or I suppose something more inspirational like, if I can get acquitted, anyone can. Those are my thoughts on the Casey Anthony situation. Please put any opinions and thoughts in the comment section. They always generate an interesting dialogue. As always, I hope you found my analysis of this topic to be interesting. Thanks for watching.